Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Sensei series. Today we're looking at 7 different ways that you can spice up your rhythm guitar playing. As always, there's links to the individual tips down there in the description, and there's tabs for each example available through my Patreon page. Without further ado, here are 7 ways to spice up your rhythm guitar playing. Number 1. Play chords in different positions. When most of us learn to play the guitar, we learn the open chords and the bar chords based on the E and the A string, which is a pretty great foundation and can take us pretty far. But I would encourage you to experiment and try to find as many different variations of playing and inverting these triads as possible. Basic chords, major and minor, are built with 3 different notes. Take, for example, a D. This chord consists of the notes D, F sharp, and A. Usually, we'll play this chord in the open position or using the 2 common bar chords. But there are many different ways that we can arrange the notes of a D chord across a guitar neck. Check it out. Being familiar with all these options can really make our progressions more interesting. Here's a simple G, D, E minor, C progression played in open position. Now let's see what we can do with it using inversions. Number 2, use chord substitutions. We're going to dive into a little bit of theory here, so bear with me. In a major scale, there are 7 different notes. We can take each of these different notes and build a basic chord, also known as a triad, off of them. No matter what major scale we use, the first chord is always major, the second chord is minor, the third chord is minor, the fourth chord is major, the fifth chord is major, the sixth chord is minor, and then 7th chord is diminished. Now each of these different chords in a major scale has a role or function. There are 3 types of functions: tonic, subdominant, and dominant. A tonic chord sounds stable or resolved. It doesn't feel like it needs to go anywhere, and it doesn't have a lot of tension. So in the key of C, the tonic chords are the first chord C, the third chord E minor, and the 6th chord A minor. The next type of function is a dominant function, and these chords feel unresolved. They feel like they need to push somewhere. In the key of C, the 5th chord G is dominant and pushes towards a tonic chord like C major. The 7th chord, the B diminished triad, also functions in the same way. Lastly, we have the subdominant function, which is kind of in between a tonic chord and a dominant chord. They're kind of half resolved, half unresolved, and slightly pushed towards a dominant chord. These chords in the key of C are the 4th chord F and the 2nd chord D minor. Are you still with me? Because now we're going to apply this knowledge practically. So now we know all the functions of the different chords in a scale. Any chords that share the same function can be swapped around in what's called a like function substitution, which can really add some interest to a progression. Let's look at a melody that we all know played with the regular chords. Now let's try it with some like function substitutions. Kind of interesting, isn't it? It's a great tool to use when you're composing or arranging, and to a certain extent you can use it when improvising as well. Number 3, use chord extensions. Last tip, we were talking about triads, or 3-note chords. First, let's look at how we build these chords. We take a scale tone from any given key. In this example, let's use the C from C major. Skip a note and add the 3rd tone to our chord. Skip another note and add the 5th tone to our chord. And now we have a C triad. We can do this with every note in a scale, giving us our basic chords that almost every pop song is based on. But if we want to make our chords a little bit more interesting, we don't have to stop at the 5th. We can take our same pattern, skip a note, and add the 7th to our chord. And we don't need to stop here. Even though it seems that we're out of scale notes, we just add another octave and keep on adding those notes to our chords. We can go on to add the 9th, the 11th, the 13th to our chord. These are called extensions because they extend beyond the normal chord. Relating back to point 1, we can also play countless variations and inversions of these new chords. So here's an example of some ways that I could extend a C major chord. And of course, we can do this with all the other chords and all the different scales. Good news, if you hate musical theory, that's it, we're moving onwards. Number 4, use chord embellishments. These are little fills and frills that we can put on chords to make the rhythm a little bit more interesting. What we can do is add hammer-ons and pull-offs to our open chords and bar chords like this. It's best if you can visualize where the corresponding scale tones are around your chord. I know if I'm playing in the key of G in the open position, these notes are available to me. So I know that I can use these notes for my embellishments like this. Moving on, number 5, create interesting root motion. The note that we build each chord on is called the root, like we've seen in prior examples. It's the foundation of our chord and everything else relates to it. I like to be aware of where the root is in my chord and where the root of the next chord is. That way I can set up the next root or walk towards it in certain settings. Check it out. This is a great way to think in a performance environment. Just be aware of what the bass player is playing because you don't want to be clashing with them. We can also use this in a compositional setting. We can pick our inversions and substitutions in order to create interesting motion with our roots. Check out this example of a cool ascending root pattern which comes from the Luke Bryan smash hit, Rain is a Good Thing. See, even mainstream music can have cool elements and you can think about them too. Number 6, get creative with your strumming. My rule of thumb is you always want your strumming arm to be a consistent rhythmic pendulum, meaning it's always going up and down with the rhythm. We're not thinking about whether or not we're doing a downstroke or an upstroke. Since that's consistently happening, what we're thinking about is whether or not we're hitting the strings with those strokes. Watch my strumming hand in this example. Once we have that pendulum ingrained in our system, we can be varying our strumming pattern without ever having to worry about whether or not we're in time. This means you can be adapting your strumming to what the other musicians in your band are doing. Remember, the best musicians are actively listening to their surroundings and engaging with them. Lastly, number 7, use finger picking. Just because we have a pick in our hand doesn't mean we can't use our other fingers. It also doesn't mean that we can't drop the pick and use all of our other fingers. This allows us to create interesting rhythms and patterns. Instead of strumming away on an A minor chord, there's a whole wealth of things that I can do with my fingers. One of my personal favorites is that Chet Atkins style, where you're playing the bass with your thumb and highlighting the chord around it, like this. It's a bit tricky. Practice these things nice and slow and gradually speed them up. And that's it, 7 ways to spice up your rhythm guitar playing. Now, it's important to always be aware of context. Some of these things may not be appropriate for certain situations. If the song calls for a guitar player to strum open chords with a simple rhythm, the best musicians won't overcomplicate that. Always listen to the song and always listen to your instincts. You want these things to come out naturally. I'm Samuraiguitarist, and if you'd like to support the future content on this channel, please consider heading over to my Patreon page and becoming a patron. There's great rewards, stuff like tabs, and I will love you forever for it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.